welcome to Heather's Library. I'm Heather, the host. I just review books on here. And as you can tell from the title of this episode, I'm going to be taking you through a few more of the books of the Shadow Falls After Dark series. And just to note before this, my voice sounds different because I am sick and I'm so bored. I've just been stuck in my house, so I figured this was the perfect time to record a podcast. Just know that I share your disgust and any involuntary noises that I make during this episode. I'm sick. I'm trying my best. So, how this is going to work, I'm going to take you through two of the novellas from the Shadow Falls After Dark series, and then I'm going to take you through two of the books from the Shadow Falls After Dark series. So, I am going to start first with Unbreakable. This is book 0.5. So this is a precursor to everything in the Shadow Falls After Dark series. I don't know why I didn't read this one first, but it is very interesting. This one follows Chase, and this is really cool because so far we have not had any point in any of the books where Chase's perspective is being viewed. So in this one, he is 14. And my first note that I made here is that Chase comes into contact with supernaturals as a human. He comes in contact with two. The first one is a lab tech in his dad's research lab who took his blood, and Chase noted that it was weird that the lab tech could tell that he was bleeding whenever the lab tech had her back turned. So she's obviously a vampire, or I think she is a vampire because the way C.C. Hunter wrote it, I believe Chase said that her eyes were like almost lime green. So that's interesting. And I actually did wonder if, because the lab tech took Chase's blood, and that's how the virus is transmitted from open wounds, if this lab tech was responsible for activating the virus in Chase, but it turns out that's not true. But that would have been cool. It would have been a cool origin story. The second supernatural he comes in contact with as a human is the palm reader. Him and Tammy, his sister's friend and his love interest in this book, actually take a session from a palm reader at this Halloween festival that they're going to. And we can tell that she is a supernatural because she actually looks at Chase's forehead, and Chase notes that it's weird that she's looking at his forehead and kind of has a weird look on her face, but then she looks at Tammy's, and Tammy's just a complete human and just doesn't even do anything. So Chase notes these things about these supernaturals that are kind of weird, but he kind of just brushes it off and goes on. Second note I have, his feelings towards Tammy are very first love. And I love love, guys. I love romance. I love historical romance. I love tension. And this is he's just so pure, and he's 14, so it's he's so innocent and pure, but he's also very hormonal. So good. So he calls her, quote, the most beautiful person he's ever seen. Oh, that is so cute, and he's just so sweet, and it's obviously first crush, first love, and I remember feeling that way, and I just love the way that this was written from Chase's perspective, and it also makes me wonder, has anybody ever felt this way about me? It's so cute. He's entranced by, everything she does. He notes that, she, twirls her hair in a specific way, and her hair smells a specific way. He notes that she, smiles, more on one side of her face than the other, and, how her eyelashes, dip. It's crazy. He loves her so much. He also admits, though, to having normal teen thoughts, which I love. He's it's not a flaw because it's normal, but you can just tell because he's so young that he definitely has teenage thoughts, and it's funny. For example, he makes a pledge to love haunted houses because Tammy was throwing herself up against his body whenever she was scared, and he was so into that because they got to be close and they could use that excuse. It's just funny, some of his thoughts to himself. But ultimately, he's such a good brother. In this book, he is so dedicated to Mindy, and he's willing to admit that to himself while outwardly like acting like she's a nuisance to him. In a part of the book, Mindy's love interest, Mindy is his sister, by the way. Mindy's love interest actually ends up assaulting her in the haunted house. And Chase rescues her from him. And he is so protective. And he is just so sweet. And he really cares about her. He is such a good brother. And I just love that. He doesn't make her feel embarrassed. And he doesn't make her feel unsafe. Like, he just wants to make sure that she's okay. And he also gets his sister's blessing to be with Tammy, which I love, because I cannot tell you the amount of times, like, I've read about forbidden love between siblings, like friends, and then it ends up kind of ruining the relationship between the siblings, and it's just horrible. And I just really like that there's that moment in this book. It's cute. But I will say, the ending of this book is so depressing and emotional, and I cried really hard, actually. I was not expecting this. I was kind of dreading it because I knew that it was going to be somewhat rough to get through, but I was not expecting this. It was so awful. So, if you don't know, Chase lost his entire family, like, in this plane crash, and that's kind of, we learned that from the actual series, but in this novella, it's really explored in detail. So, first, I started crying immediately because they hit turbulence in the plane, and Chase's mom just says, "I love you guys," and then Tammy squeezes Chase's hand, and that's when everything goes black. And then Chase has, like, a vision where his family is, like, going into heaven. He sees his entire family in the white light, but for some reason he can't go with them, and he doesn't understand why. So, one thing that I thought was interesting here, I was under the impression, up until the very, very end, I was under the impression that Chase was already being turned, and that's why he was the only survivor of the plane crash, and that's why he was able to survive, because I thought he had vampire strength and healing abilities. But he just got lucky, or unlucky, depending on how you view this. He just got lucky with how things worked out, that he was the only one to live, just as a human. He hasn't been turned at this point. He doesn't have any supernatural or special abilities at this point. Like, he's just a human that just happened to not be killed, but he is severely injured. So, he sees his family in the white light, and they're saying, like, "We love you, Chase, go on and live," but he can't go with them. And Baxter, his dog, is with Chase. He notes hearing Baxter's barking, and I was full-on sobbing at this point. Chase begs to be with them because he just doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't want to live alone. He doesn't want to live without his family. And he's, like, begging his mom and his dad, and then his dad and his mom have to convince him that it's okay to be without them. It's okay. He'll be fine. And that hurt a lot. That hurt so much, reading that. I cannot believe that was even, like, in this series. Like, up until now, we haven't really explored dark themes in any of the Shadow Falls universe. But man, that was a rough entrance into these dark themes. Overall, really liked it. I thought it added a lot of depth to Chase as a character, and it makes me feel more sympathy towards him, to be honest. Okay, Eternal. This is Shadow Falls After Dark, book number 2. This is not a novella, this is a full book. So, this one we pick up after Della is reborn, and she does have the blood transfusion, and she gets better. So, first thing that I learn, or that we learn as an audience, is that Burnett is a reborn, but he survived without transfusion. Only 3% can do that. Or so Chase says. That's the statistic that he gets from the Vampire Council. And I think actually, if I recall correctly, it was even lower than 3%. But we're just glossing over this. Like, how is it possible that Burnett is a reborn as well, and that he can survive the whole transition, being reborn into a vampire, without the blood transfusion, which is needed for most vampires who are reborn to survive? Like, that's incredible. Why is nobody talking about that? Like, I'd be worshiping the ground that man walks on. This is just incredible. So, then my next question was, why can't one person save multiple vampires to be reborn? So, in the book, it says, or Chase says that you can only bond to Chase, his reasoning for not saving Chan, Della's cousin, because Chan was exhibiting the symptoms of being reborn, but Chase didn't save him because he said that Chan would have been too weak, and that he couldn't have bonded with Chan and Della both, so he had to pick one to save. So this kind of made me think, why can't one person save multiple vampires to be reborn? Like, is it a time frame issue? Is it only that two people can be bonded at once? Can you only bond yourself to one other vampire? And how does Chase know this? So, I answer that question later in the book, but basically, a reborn who bonds to another reborn to help them to get them through the transition loses a little bit of their reborn powers each time. So the more they do it, the closer they come back down to power level of a normal vampire, which I thought was very interesting lore, and I really like that C.C. Hunter wrote that like that. It actually makes a lot of sense. And Chase knows this because of his bond with Jimmy/Eddie. And this is kind of confusing to me because in this book he's referred to as Eddie, but in the next full book he's referred to as... in this book he's referred to as Jimmy, but in this next full book he's referred to as Eddie, but I think they're the same person. The person who rescued Chase from the plane crash and was responsible for turning him. The person who is his father, his chosen father, if you will. I think that's who they're talking about, but it's not very clear. That's kind of one thing that I don't understand about this series. It's just not clear. The Jimmy and Eddie, are they the same person or are they different people? I don't know. If they are the same person, that should have been made more clear. If they aren't the same person, then why isn't Jimmy in the third book? I don't get it. But anyway, Chase knows this because his father figure in his life who rescued him was the one who also rescued him through this transition. So, continuing, Della as a reborn has new powers, and these powers are freaking awesome. So she can ghost whisper now. That's incredible, because if you recall, if you've read the Shadow Falls series, Della hates ghosts. She hates ghost whispering. She thinks it's creepy. She doesn't like it. But now she's starting to see, she starts to feel ghosts. She starts to feel their manifestations. She can feel the temperature drop. She can hear voices. She has visions. And later in the series, she can full on see ghosts. That's freaking cool. And she learns to become less and less afraid as the book goes on. It's so cool. Another one, she has visions. So in this book specifically, we're focusing on Natasha and Liam, who are victims of gang-related violence. And she is able to see them and rescue them, even though they're still alive. Now, the camp leader, Holiday, thinks that this is just improbable and that it doesn't make sense that Della's seeing people that are still alive, but that's awesome. Another power she has, she can communicate with the Death Angels. She goes to the falls. Only Burnett is known as a vampire to have done that, to be able to do that. So for Della, a teenager who is a reborn, who survived being reborn, has all these new powers. This is incredible. It is so rare and incredible. And I feel like it's not talked about enough, like how cool she is. She just kind of goes off and lives her life. This book really shows a closer relationship with Della and Burnett. And I love this because at this point, she's going through such a tough time with her dad. And she really just doesn't have that father-daughter relationship that she needs from her biological family. It's really sad, and she really feels ashamed of herself because of that. She thinks she's a monster. She says that multiple times, but Burnett fills that void for her. She also admires him for being in the FRU, and they really work on building a trusting relationship here, just because Della wants to prove to him, because she views him so highly, that she is able to complete a job and do it without being biased and do it fairly and justly, so that she can also work under him. And I think that's really cute that she's trying to impress him. One of the biggest themes throughout this book is that Della shows growth and emotional maturity. She goes through so much in this book, and you can see her growing up, which I love. She stops to think rather than just denounce more often, so instead of giving those snide remarks that Della is kind of known for, she stops to think about what it would feel like to say those words and what it would feel like to receive those words. And she experienced some guilt for her cold demeanor, for making those remarks more often. She also recognizes when she lies to herself more, which is so cool, because I know that just because growing up, that was also something that I learned to note more often in myself. That really helped me get through a lot of hard stuff and to be more honest with myself, which is a huge thing you need as an adult. Next note is that she considers telling her parents about her vampirism, which is insane because most vampires end up just faking their death. So this is really odd. Della has never once considered this before. The only reason she's considering it now is because she wants that father-daughter relationship back. She wants to rebuild that trust back with her family. And at this point in the series, I just can't imagine Della being able to tell her parents without something really bad happening. I don't see her doing that. A new character is introduced, as I mentioned a little bit ago, Natasha. And Natasha is one of the victims that she's able to see in her visions. So I see a lot of similarities between Della and Natasha. The first one is the family dynamic. So Natasha quite often wonders if her parents miss her, and she wonders what her parents are thinking of her and how life is going on without her. And Della thinks about that a lot, but the only difference is Della is able to spy on her family and actually see and get closure on these thoughts, which hurts Della, to be honest, but I guess it would be better than being in Natasha's situation in this book, because Natasha is quite literally in a grave. And another similarity, whenever Della goes on a mission to Natasha's house to get clues to help her, Della notes that Natasha's mom never made Natasha's bed after she left. After she was taken, I guess you could say. And neither did Della's mom after Della left for Shadow Falls. So I thought that was interesting that was one of the similarities that C.C. Hunter put in the book and that C.C. Hunter wrote for Della to notice and point out for us. Another similarity that I see here is the friendship between Natasha and her best friends, and then between Della and her best friends. It's very clear that they're all close to each other and they value their friendship a lot. And I really like that Natasha and Della are admitting that they care for people platonically and that they do allow themselves to experience that love and that push and pull that comes with friendship. Another note that I have here, just a personal opinion. I really want Della's sister, Marla, to be turned, because I think it would be really cool for Della to give somebody the thing that Chan gave her, which was stability and reassurance and a relationship that shows that you aren't a monster. And I also think, at least at this point in the series, this is me, I made these notes before I read the next novella and before I read the next book. So my thoughts here are just that I think it would have solved Della's alienation from her family because she would have had another person blood related to her that was also a vampire. But my opinion on that since I guess it hasn't changed, but my reasoning for wanting her sister to be turned has changed. But I'll touch on that later. So, she actually admits to herself, finally, that she's falling in love with Chase. She admits on page 295, which is 76% of the way through, that she's falling in love with him. And I'm rooting for Chase, to be honest with you, because, I don't know. I like Chase. I feel like he fits her character a lot better. And I feel like he's just, I don't know, this is going to be weird. I'm more attracted to him than Steve, but that's just me. And then, on page 297, a new conflict arises. So, Chase, in this book, still works for the Vampire Council, and Della aspires to work for the FRU, and the Vampire Council and FRU don't trust each other, because the Vampire Council is not, like, a registered affiliation in the vampire world, I guess you could say. Well, the FRU is. The FRU is a government entity. So, the new conflict is that working for the FRU might impose a barrier to their feelings, Chase and Della's, since Chase works for the council. And so, Della has to come to terms with, A, the fact that she just admitted to herself that she's falling in love with this guy, and B, she might not be able to have both. Might not be able to have Chase and the FRU at the same time. So, creates a new conflict in this series that is later explored. So, Burnett actually also explores this conflict. Burnett says that he doesn't approve of Chase on page 305. So, 10 pages after Della is finally ready to say that she does have feelings for him. And furthering this conflict, he says that Della won't have a career in the FRU if she continues to see Chase after this case of Natasha and Liam because of Chase's affiliation with the Vampire Council. And that just puts Della in a world of stress on top of everything else that she doesn't need right now. So next in the book, she meets the Vampire Council, and it was disappointing. And as a reader, I have to say it was also kind of disappointing because I guess me being a Twilight fan, I imagined the meeting would be like in a cool cathedral setting or like something like grandiose and absolutely camp and over the top, but this is in the back of a burger joint, guys. Like, this was not the setting I pictured. I guess in this modern day, you have to improvise and do what you gotta do, and post-COVID inflation, you gotta rent out whatever you can, but yeah, it was kind of disappointing, the setup, and it was also only like 5 minutes long. So Della only wants to meet the Vampire Council to get information on her family line and like her dad's brother who's not dead, who faked his death and he's a vampire. But they don't even like answer her questions directly. They skirt around them. They say things like, that's for somebody else to answer, that's not for us to answer. And she even says directly, she just says that was bullshit. And I feel the same way, Della. Honestly, I feel the same way. Ugh, so annoying. But at the end of the book, she finally decides that she wants to be with Chase, page 370, and she is ready to do whatever it takes to be with Chase, which potentially means leaving the FRU, leaving those dreams behind. And another wonderful resolution to the end of this book is that she finally gets family who understands being a supernatural, because Natasha turns out to be her blood cousin. I'm gonna be honest and say I don't quite understand. I think it was a whole, like, her aunt got pregnant at a young age and was forced to put Natasha up for adoption, but there's some way Natasha and Della are cousins, and I absolutely love it. And Natasha and Della hang out and they're friends, and it's just so emotional, and I love it. And she finally gets like a little bit of that void from her father, like being mean to her and cold to her, from Natasha. It's absolutely wonderful. And the book is left on two major cliffhangers. first cliffhanger is that Chase betrayed her by being in touch with her uncle and lying about it. So the uncle that is Della's dad's brother who faked his death, who's a vampire, the uncle that Della has spent this entire book trying to find, Chase has known him the entire time. Chase has been in contact with him the entire time. Hasn't told Della. And she's been lying to her. And so Della, at the end of this book, is like, this is stupid. I can't believe you do this to me. And I just decided I want to be in love with him. And now I question all of my decisions. Which is not fair because, one, you can have feelings for somebody and they can still hurt you. And that's kind of normal. But, you know, that's just Della's character. And I've also done that in real life too, to be honest. And the second major cliffhanger is that her dad gets arrested for a murder that Della suspects her uncle of. The uncle that Chase has been lying to her about this entire time. So Della feels really guilty because Della kind of got the case reopened and then her dad's DNA was on the murder weapon and it's a whole thing. So 2 major cliffhangers. And one thing I wanted to point out before I move on to the next book in the series is that Chase's betrayal is similar to Lucas's betrayal in Shadow Falls. And this is because Lucas in Shadow Falls ends up getting engaged to this werewolf and Kylie doesn't know about it, but they're in a relationship and it's like a whole thing. And this is kind of similar because it's like a huge betrayal of trust between the two as a couple, and then it's like right at the time that the girl decides they want to be with the guy. And it's just really complicated, and none of these supernatural relationships are black and white. It's rough, y'all. It does make me wonder if the relationship will end the same way, because Kylie ended up forgiving and staying with Lucas, so I'm wondering if Della will do the same thing. And I think my question is answered later on, but I'm not finished with the series yet. I still have 5 more books to get through before I finish it. But I'm sure, if I'm being real with you, I'm sure that her and Chase will be together. But moving on to the next book of the series. It's actually the novella. It is Shadow Falls After Dark 2.5, and it is called Spellbinder. And this one is from Miranda's point of view. Miranda is the witch of the 3 best friends. And I absolutely love Miranda. She's so pure and so just kind-hearted and innocent. And because this is from Miranda's perspective, I want to point out that Kylie and Della are so different in their own self-images. Kylie's point of view of herself in Shadow Falls is that she's just so like dark and twisty, almost the way Meredith Grey sees herself in Grey's Anatomy. Like, Kylie thinks that she's got so many issues and that she's a failure in the beginning, but Miranda really views Kylie as the most innocent, angelic friend that she could ever have. And Della is viewed as such a strong-willed kind of mama bear character, and that is absolutely not at all what Della sees herself as. Della sees herself as being a punk, angsty teenager, and she is that, but she's not as scary, I think, as she wants to come off, which maybe would piss her off if she was a real person I told her that, but I digress. So, they're loving, non-judgmental, selfless friends. Miranda loves them so much, and Della seems so much less dark and brooding. It is night and day difference between how they view themselves, which really adds a lot more context to their friendship, I think. And in this book, Miranda's mom is so mean. Now, from After Dark series and from Shadow Falls series, we can kind of infer that Miranda's mom feels disappointed in her abilities because Miranda is dyslexic, but this is rough. This hurts reading this because I've had my own fair share of feeling like I'm the cause for disappointment and failure. Miranda shares a lot of those hard feelings here. And Miranda's mom makes her feel like she's a disappointing child and that she's failing. And another note I have on Miranda's mom is that she should not be meddling in Miranda's love life. Now, I'm all for parents being supportive of their child's first whatever. I'm all for that support, but the whole plot of this book is that Miranda's mom is urging Miranda to get first place in this contest so that Miranda can go to Paris. And Perry, the dude who just dumped Miranda, is in Paris. And that's Miranda's main motivation to go to Paris and win the competition. Like, no. If some dude just dumped my daughter, I am trying everything I can to make sure she's getting what she needs that is healthy. And it is not healthy to try to win a contest so she can go halfway across the world to see some dude who just broke her heart. No. Why would she want to put Miranda in that position? That makes me think Miranda's mom doesn't have the best interest for her daughter in her mind, but maybe because I don't have kids, I don't understand that, but I did not like that. But I understand that the author here had to create a plot point, a reason for Miranda to even want to go to Paris in the first place. But even if I'm putting myself in Miranda's shoes, I wouldn't want to go to Paris to see the dude who just broke my heart and who isn't returning my calls, even though I made him a magic phone. But whatever. So I also just thought it was interesting. As I'm reading this series, I get more and more questions and more thoughts about the universe itself, and I hope they continue to be answered as C.C. Hunter continues writing, but we'll see. So this one, I was just interested in the concept of Wicca competitions. That is so interesting to me. So are the Wicca competitions the only, are they the only supernaturals that compete? Because so far, I'm into this. I haven't heard of any other supernaturals competing in, staged events like this. And the spells are always rhyming. The spells always have some poetry in here, which I think is interesting because in Harry Potter, in similar universes, similar lore, it's actually kind of in the minority to have rhyming spells, because I think that's kind of seen as a joke, as a mock thing of wizards and witches and Wicca in general. But I thought it was bold that the author chose to go with that as a means to spell. But I think they're kind of funny sometimes. I think that what they can say is funny. I think the way that they can chant spells is funny to me, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was lighthearted. And as a reader, it's easier to understand, and it's easier to pronounce, so I'm kind of for it. I kind of like it. Now, I think this kind of answers my first questions about, are these the only supernatural beings that compete? Because this competition that they're doing is for the role of High Priestess, and that's why Miranda wants to win so bad, also to see Perry. But I guess that kind of answers the first question, because why would they have competitions if you don't get a rank out of it, I guess. So they might very well be the only supernaturals, at least so far that I can tell, that compete in competitions like this. Now, as in stark contrast to Kylie and Della, it is noted here that Miranda is much more honest and easy to get the truth out of. She told her relationship status to Sean, a different wizard in this universe, who she is crushing on. She just told her relationship to him. She just revealed all of her trauma and her hurt and her pain to this man. Maybe that's because she likes him, but also she literally a week ago, before this book is taking place, she just got out of the relationship and she's telling him about how much it hurt. Miranda and Perry were together since nearly the beginning of the Shadow Falls series. That's crazy. That's I'm gonna guess it's around a year that they've been dating. And if that's your first serious relationship and y'all just broke up and it was not mutual, then that's gonna hurt. But she's just so easygoing and is willing to tell the truth that she just tells him. Couldn't be me. All I gotta say about that. A huge plot point in this novella is that Miranda and Tabitha, one of Miranda's competitors in the competition, and also her kind of mini rival, I guess you would call it, because they're not really rivals, they're just it's just a mean girl situation. Tabitha doesn't like Miranda doesn't know why, and then she finds out that her and Tabitha are sisters because they share the same dad. So Miranda's dad was married to Tabitha's mom, and then Miranda's dad cheated on Tabitha's mom with Miranda's mom, and then Miranda's mom got pregnant, and then came Miranda. So Tabitha is like 5 months older than Miranda, but they're sisters, and Miranda at first has a hard time dealing with this, but then Miranda and Tabitha they're kind of cute. They get really chummy by the end of this book because they had the same experience. Like, they had a not completely honest dad, but they're related and they get to share that experience together, which I think is beautiful. And I love that for them. They're cute. And as I mentioned earlier, but I want to kind of go into detail about it, I'm rooting against Perry because Miranda has been nothing but devoted to this man for so long in the series, and then he just ups and dumps her because he's going to Paris for this school, which I understand. I'm not mad at him about that. I'm mad at him because he didn't even put up the effort to try. Like, he just dropped this bomb on her. Then Miranda said that they could make it work. Perry said no. And then Miranda made him a magic enchanted phone so that he could call her from wherever he was, in the plane, in a ditch somewhere, with no cell service. Like, it didn't matter. Miranda did this for him. And she's so devoted to him. It makes me mad. Like, the way he just dropped her and treated her. Ugh, just makes me so mad. And then he, like, kind of... I know this would contradict what I just said, but while they're in Paris, he doesn't even really give her much room or space to grieve the relationship. So he just, like, shows up and, like, talks with her about it and, like, says, like, you know, I was wrong, but I'm still hoping for us. It's like, no, you dropped her. Be prepared to not keep her. Over that. And also, I'm rooting for Della and Chase in this series because Chase is, like, the second, I guess he's not the second choice, but, like, he's the second guy romantically that we see the character with, and it's a new fling, and I love new blossoming love, and that's what I want for Miranda with Sean, so that's also why I'm rooting against Perry. But you never know. Although, if anything is to be proven from this series, is that CC Hunter loves making the more difficult choice end up being the end-all be-all choice for these women. So, they end up getting trapped under these catacombs in Paris, and it's a whole thing. And there's this scene in this book that I think is so freaking funny. I just want to recount it for everybody. So it's the scene of Miranda giving blood to a random French vampire. I think it's hilarious because Miranda has to give her blood to him directly, so he has to bite her and then suck the blood out in order for him to live. And it's just so funny picturing this because the way it's described is that Miranda is putting her wrist up to this vampire's mouth, and she's coaching Tabitha on what to do if, like, he won't stop. And Tabitha, the entire time, is, like, screaming, like, should I hit him? Should I hit him? While Miranda is, like, getting her blood viciously sucked out of her. It's so funny. I think it's great. I love the bond that they just formed at the end of this book. So this brings me to my next book in this series, and this one is a full-length book. It is not a novella. This is After Dark, Book 3. It is called Unspoken. And this one, I mentioned earlier that I thought it was interesting that the very first of this series was in Chase's perspective. This one is from both Della and Chase's perspective. This is the first ever full-length book of the Shadow Falls universe entirely that is written in multiple characters' POVs. It is very cool, and I really like it. It puts me on the edge of my seat, and I think it is a mark of growth of the writing style. I love it. So, as I said, my first note here is that pieces of the chapters are from Chase's perspective. This is new to the series and new to the entire Shadow Falls universe. And another note that I have is that Burnett is so sweet on Della. He really recognizes the role that Della has kind of put him into, and he loves that. He's so protective of her. And he even yells at Chase on page 35, so we're not even that far into this book, but he yells at Chase, "I don't give a rat's ass what you are, you hurt her." And that is just such a fatherly phrase to say to the dude who broke your daughter's heart. I love it. It makes me just root for Burnett all the way. no matter what. I love him, and he's such a sweetie. Even though he tries to act like he's a bad vamp, but, like, he's such a sweetie. So, I kind of mentioned this in the novella notes that I just went over, but I just wanted to say that it seems that it's a theme within this universe that the women forgive the men for screwing up so very badly. For instance, Kylie and Lucas. Lucas got engaged behind Kylie's back. Kylie took a book length to forgive him. Miranda and Perry, kind of, because in the novella that I just went over with you, Miranda kind of forgives Perry, but kind of doesn't say, like, I'm gonna be back with you yet. So, we're not sure. But if you remember, Perry was kind of the first for Miranda, so this wouldn't necessarily fit into the theme if she was to choose him over Sean. But I just wanted to read off one of Holiday's quotes. This is my favorite quote from Holiday so far. She says, "Chase Tallman, if you hurt Della one more time, I'm going to remove your boy parts, grind them up, and feed them to the hungry rats and scorpions." On page 46. Holiday and Burnett are such good parents to both their little girl and both to their big girl, Della. They're so sweet. I just love that Della, even though she's going through such a rough time with her family, that she has a chosen family that she can rely on. And I just finished this book, but I don't know if I agree with this next note that I'm about to say anymore. Just going from reading the very end of the book, like, just yesterday. But when I wrote this was at the beginning of the book. So, for me, at this time, I wrote that the love triangle is more difficult for me here because Steve is just so nice. But I don't think I agree with that after finishing the book because of certain events that happened. I thought there was a lot of chemistry between Steve and Della still at the beginning of this book, but I guess I grow to realize as I read through that it wasn't quite chemistry as I thought, but I do think he is a fine man, and Della obviously thinks so too. And I guess I would agree with it in comparison to, like, Miranda, Perry, Sean love triangle and Kylie, Lucas, Derek love triangle, because Steve has got it going on, to be honest with you. So I think because of Steve's caring nature, because he's a great friend and a good doctor, that's why I wrote that it was more difficult for me here. But this quote, Della says on page 126, "Steve was just another thing in her life that had changed." That kind of indicated to me the direction in which the relationship was going. But I did believe at the time the love triangle was more difficult for me. Obviously my opinion has changed. So, Chase says, "I love you" to Della for the first time on page 160, but she does not accept it. She just completely ignores it and goes off in a different direction. She's trying to work a new case professionally. And I just want to bring up some things that I thought were interesting here. I really think this book in particular is really similar to Twilight. It kind of captures the essence of the whole love triangle of Edward, Bella, Jacob. I just want to read off a quote to y'all. So, it begins by Steve and Chase arguing. "Please," Steve spit out, "I'm not ignorant enough to believe any deal I make with you could influence Della. And I respect her enough to not even try. She'll make up her own mind who she wants to be with. You have no control over her decisions. If you think you do, that just goes to show you don't even know her." The words and insinuation hit hard. "And you'll respect her decision when she chooses me?" Chase asked. "I'll accept it, just as I'm sure you will when she chooses me." I thought this was so very similar to the tent talk whenever Edward and Jacob are arguing over Bella's sleeping body in Eclipse. If you've read that, I thought their conversation was filled with so much tension, and I can't really pinpoint why, but, like, picturing two, like, teenagers arguing over this girl really makes me picture Edward and Jacob arguing over Bella. I don't know. I don't want to say I like one more than the other, but it's just interesting to me. Interesting. Another interesting thing is that CC Hunter name drops Pride and Prejudice, and I believe she also name drops Twilight. Let me see. I'm trying to find my notes here. Give me 1 second. Twilight. She name drops Pride and Prejudice on page 199. She name drops them because Della talks about how she can miss school. Della says that she doesn't need to, recognize themes in Pride and Prejudice because it's not important in real life. So I thought that was interesting, and I wonder if that's, an ode to Pride and Prejudice, and CC Hunter likes that book, or if it's a diss. I think it's an ode. I would like to think it's an ode. I'm trying to find my Twilight note where it's name dropped Twilight. Twilight is name dropped on page 392 because that is the movie that Della's sister wants to watch with her. I thought that was interesting, and I don't think that's a diss. I think that's also an ode to Twilight because vampire lore was really popular at the time. I thought it was interesting. It's just two big name drops in one book is a bold move, but I respect it, I respect CC Hunter. Okay, continuing on in the plot. Chase signs a contract with the FRU and completely voids his association with the Vampire Council on page 207. And this is really sweet. It's bittersweet, I'll say, because Della and Chase are not together at this point. He is doing this in the hopes that he will win Della back, but I would like to think a little part of Chase himself really wants this as well. It's interesting to me because this means more to him than he thought it would. He thought it would just be another professional business deal, closed and done, but he feels pride in himself, and he even wishes that Della was there to witness the signing of the contract because he wants to celebrate with somebody. That was really sweet, but also bittersweet because Della isn't there. She's not going to celebrate with him. It's just him. He also compares this job to becoming associated with the Vampire Council and doing missions for the Vampire Council, which I thought is interesting because in the beginning of this series, if you remember, Chase didn't even think that the FRU was comparable to the Vampire Council because he thought the Vampire Council was doing much more important work and that it was a much better functioning organization than the FRU, but now he thinks that they're on the same level. I like it. Their relationship, Della and Chase's, is maturing. So the last book was about kind of Della just herself maturing as a person, but now this one is about Chase and Della's relationship maturing into something else. In the book, they go on a double date with Natasha and Liam. Yes, they were saved, and they're cute, and they're a couple, and they are absolutely lovely people. And they just kind of act like an adult couple, out on a dinner date. It's really cool seeing that awkwardness kind of fade away, and they just are unbounded, but they're bonded to each other at the same time. It's really cool. And they both open up about their trauma with morgues because they end up having to go to a morgue for a specific case. And Della and Chase get kind of weird with each other here, but they both kind of explain why that is, and just they release some trauma and they share bad experiences with each other. And that's really good for them because they both recognize the power of vulnerability here. One thing I thought was important is that Della really, really worries that people will abandon her, and I wonder if she begins to notice this becoming more prominent because she is becoming more vulnerable with people. She notes that she pushes others away, but she also worries about the effects of this, so she kind of, it's like a conflict of interest. She wants to push people away because she doesn't want them to get so close they can actually hurt her, but she also doesn't want to be hurt by being abandoned by those same people. she's expecting it, but she also doesn't want it to happen. I thought that was an interesting part of her character. I think it's most likely related to her dad's behavior to her here. Della says I love you to Steve on page 279 because he offered to help with the case relating to her dad. But then as soon as she said it, it kind of cleared things up for her. This inadvertently forces her to decipher the feelings for Chase and Steve that she's been avoiding this entire book. So for the entire nearly 300 pages that I've gone through here, she's been avoiding deciding who she loves and who she doesn't love and whatever. So that makes it very, very awkward. But, you know, life goes on, and this is ultimately a good thing for her because she's able to get through some things. I had a question in here because of a part of the book here. So, in a part of this book, Della is in a filing storage room for a hospital, and she has a ghost attached to her who is throwing the filing boxes everywhere, and she is accused by a human of like having telekinetic powers. And this makes me wonder again, are telekinetic supernaturals a part of this universe? Because this has been twice now that I've had the same question and it's still unanswered, and I do wonder if they're telekinetic, is that just their like supernatural species, or do they have telekinetic powers that are attached on their species? You know what I'm saying? I wonder if I'll find that out, if they'll answer that question, because so far 90% of the questions that I've had about the different aspects of the supernatural world and universe have been answered. So, continuing on in this plot, Della's dad thinks that she's capable of murder, which is so low and disgusting, and I hate it, and I don't know how you can come back from that as a father and as a daughter. I can't believe he would even think that. And then he goes as far to submit her as a suspect for the murders of her neighbors. That's so messed up. Like, how can you... I don't know, y'all. My parents told me that if I commit a murder, they would still love me. So I'm assuming that means they wouldn't turn me in. But bro doesn't even have proof. He just has suspicions, and he turned her in. Like, No sir, no sorry Bob, no thank you, that's so rude. I can't. I just don't... This whole series paints Della's dad to be a complete jerk, and I just can't accept the ending to this book, but we'll talk about it in a minute. I want to read a quote because I think this is so cool. I wrote, this is from the book, this is a quote from one of the... I think the main conflict is about to be resolved. He took a swing. Della caught the bat and spotted a touch of fear in his eyes, for good reason, but oddly, he didn't think to check her pattern. His mistake. And my note for that was just simply, badass! Exclamation point. Because that is so cool. Della is such a cool character. She's so freaking strong. She was strong before she was reborn, but man, she just has cool powers now. And I'm just imagining like such a cool, beautiful, half Asian girl and just catching the bat after some dude swings it at her and just completely taking him off guard and like watching that fear in his eyes as he's like, oh, this little girl can't beat me, and then she does. So freaking cool. Love it. So at the end of this book, Della gets a lot more comfortable with displaying emotion and physical touch. She even cries to Burnett and lets herself be held by him and Holiday. And she also lets herself be held by Miranda and Chase a lot more. Whenever they offer her affection, she just readily takes it. And it's not even seen as tolerating it anymore. It's just like she actually wants that affection. And she learns to love it. Or to like it. I wouldn't say love it. And at the end of this book, her parents finally know that she's a vampire. And they come to accept her. And the relationship seems to be better. And this is why I was going to say, I just don't think this makes up... Like, I don't think this is going to completely resolve her dad, like, turning her in for murder. That's just too big of an issue for me, personally. I just think that plot point is just, like, too big. I don't know. It's too unresolvable. Like, there need to be multiple books, multiple therapy sessions that we can see as readers for me to believe that the relationship is somehow just, like, mended. Like, in the book, Della and her dad just, like, talk about it, and he just forgives her, and then Della is, like, super forgiving for the first time ever. So, I don't know. I can understand why her relationship would be better with everybody else, but her dad and her magically being better, I don't know. I haven't read the next books in the series. I still have 5 books to go, but I'm just hoping that I see more of a easy progression into a better relationship and not so sudden, oh, you're my daddy still, I love you. Like, I can't. It just wouldn't be believable for me personally. But I would like to believe that that's how life works. That's all I have on this book. I have, like I said, 5 more books to go, and I will have more and more notes on that later. There will be another episode coming out. So, if you're still listening, I thank you. This was a much longer episode than I normally do, but I just kind of wanted to get all these books out of the way. Thank you for listening, and I'll be coming out with a new episode sometime soon, and that one will actually be over one of the classics. I have never read this book before, and I don't want to give anything away about what it is, but it is kind of related to what I read today, and some of the important media of pop culture that I happened to mention today. So I will see you next time with that episode. Thank you for listening.